Welcome, everyone. This is New Hope in the Lord. Your hosts, Reverend Joe and Rosa, are not with us today. I'll be filling in for them as best the Lord lets me. I'm Bob Licata. My guest today has a lot to share, and I don't want to take an amount of time away from what he has. Many experiences that we have in life are like that. They're so detailed. The memories are filled with so much information. But you know, sometimes when we boil it all down and we distill it to the important things, it really is very simple. We were somebody before that had no hope. As Joe often says, his whole purpose in doing this show is to bring new hope in the Lord. Well, the world will offer us lots of hope, lots of things to put our trust in. And many times we get caught up in those things and we go off in those directions. And in reality, we always come to a point where we realize that those things have no hope because they're empty. Well, fortunately, there is hope. And Jesus said he came to give us that hope. We hope in this show that you will learn to trust in Jesus, and through the testimony of our guest today, you will experience some insights into how your life can be changed. My guest today is Rey Melendez. Rey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure
To have you here.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, I'm glad you were able to make it. I was a little concerned today, the way things were working out. We were running into little issues myself, but you know, Rey, we were talking earlier, and you were explaining to me some of the things of your past. Now, you were raised in a Christian home, right?
Yes.
But it was not a Roman Catholic home. It was what kind of a church did you?
Pentecostal.
Pentecostal.
Yes.
Now, did they speak English or Spanish in the church?
In Spanish.
Spanish. Okay.
Yes.
So you're fluent in Spanish as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you grew up primarily in the Bronx.
Yes.
Okay. But you did say you spent some time in Puerto Rico.
Yes, between the age of 10 and 14, lived in Puerto Rico. Yep.
You were with your parents at the time. Your family was in Puerto Rico. For
yes,
that
my
short
mother
time?
and father decided to relocate, try something different between 1980, 81 to 85.
Yeah.
84.
And you were just entering your teen years then.
Yeah.
That's where you learned how to read and write Spanish. And,
Yes.
Now, you also told me that you had some strong belief in God throughout all this, and you sensed that you knew about Jesus in your upbringing.
Yes.
Yet, as you came back to the Bronx then at that age, and tell me you were going to school, right? At
the age of 14, yeah, we came back to the Bronx from Puerto Rico. I was going to high school, and would visit church occasionally with my parents.
And then you had a fateful day one day, right? At 15 years old.
Yes.
You saw someone from a very early past, right? How did you first meet your wife?
I
mean, really first.
Oh, she was a class monitor at PS 161, and I was a student. I was a kindergarten and first grade student, and she was already in third or fourth grade. And she was a class monitor, and I would see her up in front and would think that she was a pretty young lady.
But now at 15, something was a little bit different, right?
Yeah, then when I saw her again at the age of 15, I was walking down the same neighborhood, and I recognized her, and I said, oh, wow, that's the girl from school, you know. I went to school with her brothers and sisters.
At that point, she was a woman, right?
Yeah.
You were a young man.
And I remember crossing paths with her, and I said hello, and she looked at me, and, you know, we took it from there, you know.
You started dating and
Yes.
had a relationship started.
Yes.
Had your first daughter.
Yes.
And now things started to change a little bit at that point, because now you had to provide for her and yourself and your daughter. Tell me, how did you do that?
It was tough coming up, you know, growing up in the Bronx. I tried an honest living, but it wasn't the best. So
Mhm.
you know, I had to sell drugs and do things that
You're not proud of.
yeah weren't too honorable at that point. And it was like a wave at that time where everyone wanted to be a drug dealer and
Mhm.
do who had the most money and who would just live
Right.
and to provide anyway. That was the main thing though.
Did you finish high school at that point?
No, I didn't finish high
So
school.
so you just moved over into a street life.
Yes.
And your wife, she was comfortable with that, right? Because she had some experience in her family life because of it.
Yeah, well, she was okay with it because I had to provide. But still to this day, when we speak, she tells me that she saves me because she took me out of the streets pretty
Mhm.
much
Mhm.
during that time. She never wanted me to do that,
Yeah.
so she was always but she was all right with it. She,
Yeah.
she had no choice.
Right.
I was,
Yeah. Right. Right.
know.
I mean, family comes first sometimes,
Mhm.
but then there's that also the risk that some of the risks you were taking, some of the fears. I'm sure she, as a wife and mother, she felt that that she'd rather not have you in that. But now you were also having problems of your own, right, with drug addiction.
Yes. As a drug dealer, and spending many nights out in the street, you tend to try sometimes, and I ended up falling into drugs.
Mhm.
Having it there and having to pay for it at one point, all of it there
Yeah.
at hand, and then when you don't have it, then things change because now at one point I got addicted to that.
Right. But you said your addiction was pretty strong,
Yes, it was.
and then you what caused you to make that decision that you wanted to go into rehab?
My kids,
How many did you have at that point? You had two girls then?
3.
Oh, all three already. Okay.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And my family, my daughter, my wife. And
Your mother and father were still alive at the time?
Yeah, they were still together. Yeah,
Mhm.
they weren't my best friends. They were strong from coming up in a Puerto Rican family. There's a lot of traditional upbringing where and I was doing the wrong thing. My
Yeah.
father was never that kind of a man. He was an honorable man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was a hard-working person,
Yes.
and he was a big, strong supporter of the family, right?
Hmm. And I was doing all the wrong things, something that he never taught me. So it was tough, and I wanted to follow in his steps. I had already experienced at a young age a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't like it. I was tired of it, and I knew that it wasn't going to lead me anywhere,
Right.
either death or a long time in jail,
Mm.
and then I would lose.
Your family.
Hmm.
And you were worried about what would happen to your girls.
Yes, I was concerned about, what their fate would be.
Mhm.
My wife was young, pretty, and she would, my daughters would be vulnerable to,
Right. Right.
having a stepdad and just things happening.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Especially in the Bronx or
Mhm.
any rough neighborhood in any city in the world, these kinds of things
Yeah.
would give a. And I guess one of the things your father gave you was the concern to be a father,
Yes.
to hold dear your family.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Sometimes that's the positive things that we have in our lives, whether it's a baby, a single mother, I would say sometimes doesn't have a guy in her life to
Mm-hmm.
help her, but that kid alone will help that woman finish high school or get her GED or get a job, and those are the things that count. Besides Jesus, having God in your life, which is the main thing. But that's what wanted me to stop. My daughters and my family.
And then you decided to go into
The rehab.
A rehab. Was it easy to get into a rehab program at the time?
No, it was tough. I had to lie about who I was. I used a different name to get in, and I did different, but I got in. I got
Yeah.
into the rehab. It wasn't easy, but I got in.
And then you had some success with it, but you told me that there was a lot of opportunities for going back to the old ways, right?
Yes. like I said, maybe other people experience these things too, and you want to do something right, and then the enemy comes lurking right around. So while I was in rehab, a fella managed to sneak in some drugs, and 2 days into my recovery, I relapsed. And it wasn't nothing big, but when my wife went in and she saw me, just by looking at my eyes, she knew that I wasn't the same person. I was already, and she knew what went on in those places.
And she was, at that point, she was ready to
Yeah.
give up on you, right? That's when you had those really strong feelings about concern for your daughters, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, she walked out on me. She walked out, and she just didn't want to be at the visit. And I saw them leave, and that hit me. I said, "Wow, this is it."
Now, were you praying at this time, or did you shoot prayers up to God occasionally?
Yeah, I did. I did occasionally. I've always, even at the worst of my days, in my darkest moments, I've always prayed early in the morning and at night before I go to bed.
Wow.
You know, I kept it like a ritual more. You know, even if it was a minute, I would be laying down in bed. I said, "No, I got to get on my knees," and I would jump down. Well, God, thank you for protecting me during the day, because you know, I made it one more night.
Right.
In the environment
You knew
in.
what that day
Yeah.
was filled with, the risks that you had taken.
And but then during the day also, I would encounter issues, and I would always say, "Well, thank you, Lord, for your mercy." You know, because I knew about God since the age of 11, being presented to Jesus through my family, and you know, so yeah, I was shooting up prayers at that moment.
And then throughout the rehab process, you were continuing that.
Yes, it was tough because I quit drugs cold turkey.
Now, you say cold turkey, but you actually kind of weaned yourself off of it, right? You made a decision that you weren't going to go through the real rehab process, right? You had a big conflict with the rehab facility at that point?
Yes, I saw my wife leave, and I had to get discharged. But I was in there for a certain amount of days, and they wouldn't get paid from the city, you know.
Yeah.
If I would leave before that, and there would be a lot of things that, you know, a lot of red tape. So they didn't want to let me go for those reasons, even though maybe for my health, but I believe it was more for that. And yeah, I had to start a ruckus, and you know, but I got discharged from the rehab on my own after starting a commotion and signing papers. They let me go.
And then you went, with the help of your family, you went through a process of weaning yourself off the drugs.
With the help of my
rapidly.
family, yes. My mother, you know, would go and bring me drugs, and slowly but surely, I would, instead of taking like a whole bag of heroin, I did half one day and then a little bit the next day, and it took me exactly 2 weeks to get off the drugs, because I experienced a lot of things that were horrible. You know,
it's not an easy getting off of drugs. Is not an easy experience physically, right? Mentally, it's painful, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Now, you were telling me about another pain in your life, which had to do with the condition of your heart. When did you first recognize that? When you were playing ball, when you were a young man, or actually before you were even, when you were in Puerto Rico, was it?
Yeah, at the age of 11, playing baseball in Puerto Rico, you know, I experienced palpitations of the heart. My heart would just flutter real fast, and I couldn't control it.
And you would feel a certain weakness, and you were kind of dizzy, you said? And
yeah, I would experience shortness of breath, and then blood rushing to my head, and dizziness.
And so now, after rehab, I'm surprised that this didn't get worse while you were taking the drugs, but after you finally kicked the drugs, this condition was still part of you, right?
Yes.
So how did it come now that you're off drugs, right? You're starting to get your life together. You didn't have a profession anymore, a career. What did you do to earn a living? You're not selling drugs anymore, right?
No, well, once I quit the drugs that I stopped using, to the glory of God, the example that I have from my dad, I started working, and I got a job miraculously at a hardware store real quick, driving a van after I stole some material to sell to a hardware store. Unfortunately, I have to say it that way. And the guy sees me, and he tried to lowball me for the stuff that I had. And I said, "Listen, I'm not a drug user. I have to stop, you know, I wasn't using anymore." And I said, I don't use any drugs like before. I have a family. I want to take care of my family. I'm not here to get a fix. I'm here because I know what this is worth. And he was like, he was trying to give me a low price, and I haggled with him. And he said, man, you're hard to do business with these days. And I got the money that I wanted, and he said, you're really different. And I said, yeah, I am. And he said, well, you mind if I give you a job then? And I said, sure, I would like to drive.
So you went from a thief to a worker.
Yeah.
Incredible. God is incredible.
Yep. So the guy offered me a job, and we negotiated salary then too. He started me, I remember, with $400 cash a week back then. And
it was a lot of money back then,
yeah,
even then.
Yeah. 1988,
yeah,
89. Sure. And so he...
I mean, it wasn't probably as good as your drug dealing days, but it was definitely enough to support a
yeah,
family.
I was satisfied with that, and that's how it started my career. I started driving for him, and then he gave me a $100 raise a month later. We became good friends because he was the son of the owner of the hardware store. We were pretty much almost the same age.
Yeah.
And he gained his trust, and I would drive the truck without permission, without a license to drive a truck. And the truck driver was making $900 a week back then, cash. So I thought it was great money. I was like, wow.
Yeah, no, that's
so that drove
living.
me into wanting to get a CDL, and I did that. So I pursued that, I followed that, got my CDL, and that led to my truck driving career.
So you were a truck driver, and then that led to you learning how to operate heavy machinery, and heavy equipment, which is what you do now, right?
Yes.
So then your wife was still with you, right? Your family is good. Did your fourth daughter come along at that point?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So your family is growing. You're surviving, living, but your relationship with Jesus, with God at that point was still somewhat the same as it always had been, right? It was hadn't really changed that much.
No, it was more of knowing God's grace where, oh, he's God, he'll forgive me, he's there, you know, kind of like, but not with fear, not wanting to take advantage of that, always. So, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. It was more knowing about God.
Oh, you knew about. Okay.
Yeah. And because when
you knew of him, but not him himself.
Yes, because when you have a relationship with Jesus, it becomes all different. Now, you fall in love with Jesus, and when you fall in love with someone, like even with a woman, you devote everything to that. So that's what I have to say, and I use that term because I want people to know that, because a lot of us know of Jesus, know of God, but we don't have that relationship with Jesus. And I was told this by someone once we have this relationship with God and you experience the love of Jesus, you don't want to turn back. So yeah, I knew of God back then, but I didn't have a relationship with him.
That's true. Yeah, I know what you mean. You don't want to turn back from that, whereas when you just know of him, it's very easy to keep one foot in the world and one foot in the church. You do the things that you might have learned as a young person to do that you think meets the requirements, and you're basically trying to legally say to God, okay, I'm deserving of going to heaven, when in reality you don't understand what God expects of you and what he wants of you.
Yes.
And now you have the life is going ahead with you good, and you're doing, in the world's eyes, you're doing very well. But your palpitations came back, right? They started to interfere with your life more?
Yeah, they always were there. I always had the palpitations, and they would interfere, especially with my work. And I was always kind of like physically active, you know. I had a different lifestyle now, you know. I was off the drugs, so I would devote myself to sports and things like that. So I had the palpitations, and I struggled with that. And I always brought that to Jesus. Or, you know, you're in the business of healing. Heal me, please. And, but I didn't have that relationship.
I'm a businessman. Let's negotiate this, right?
So I didn't. But you know, they were always there.
So then, what you finally got to the point where you said, enough? What motivated you to seek help on getting that resolved? In
2004, they got little. I was home from a bad experience that I was going through with work, and I saw God's hand in my life back then too. That was another miracle, you know, that I experienced. But I decided to go check up with my cardiologist because I have good insurance, and they were there. Then they determined what it was, and it wasn't, you know, just they would come with exertion, the palpitations.
Right.
So and they gave me a medicine for it. It was a beta blocker that would control my palpitations. They said
you said something about a thyroid condition that you had too, right?
Yeah, and then at the time they saw that I had high calcium in the blood, so they speculated that the palpitations were from the high calcium. So I had a parathyroid extraction. They took care of that.
And the beta blockers were helping you with the palpitations.
Yeah, so I stood on them for 10 years, from 2000.
Now 10 years later, though, something changed again, right? You wound up going to the doctors and talking about the beta blockers, and then you wound up in the hospital for the stress test, right? And that's where they gave you the bad news, right? That they wanted to give you a defibrillator to go home with and give yourself a shock every once in a while.
Yeah. So I lived with those palpitations for over 10 years, and I would visit church and come back and forth. But I always prayed about that to Jesus.
Right.
And one day I was on my way to a hunting trip in 2012. It was 2012 when it all started. And I heard an audible voice, literally, tell me, go to the hospital, I'm going to heal you. And I'm going into my basement, I'm like, but I felt it in my heart.
But you were fighting it.
Yep.
You were going back and forth.
Yep.
I really want to go hunting.
I wanted to go hunting.
I don't want to go to the hospital.
So I go back and I tell my wife upstairs, I say, listen, this is what I felt, and this is what I heard. And she says, well, you feel that way, and that's what you heard. She knew that I had strong faith, and she knew we had experienced certain situations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, she knew who you were, right?
Yeah, and she said, well, I think you should listen to God or your heart and go. And so I took her advice, and I went. And
that's where the doctors, they did another stress test. They told you that, we can't help you, but now you were sleeping. They made you stay in the hospital, right? And tell me about how you were sleeping, and then you woke up. Well, you had not a dream, but what would you call it?
Kind of like a revelation, more or less. I was at the hospital because I went to, that day. Everything changed. I got my stress test. Sure enough, palpitations were there. I was sent to the emergency room. Doctors were around me, checking me out. They saw what kind of condition I had. They said it wasn't a deadly one, but I could die from passing out or fainting and hurting someone, a car accident, or falling. They wanted to put a defibrillator on me. So now I'm struggling on my own when they leave you.
Yeah, you didn't want to do that.
Yeah, I said, Jesus.
But they wouldn't let you go.
Right? They wouldn't let me go. They said, Jesus, this is not what you wanted me to come here for. I know it's not for a defibrillator because I could have gotten that done many years ago.
Right, but now you heard or
a voice,
an experience, right?
Yep. And then at that point, right before I fall asleep in the hospital, I felt I had that kind of like a revelation where a doctor's gonna come and tell you what's gonna happen, how I'm gonna do it, exactly.
He's gonna give you good news, right?
Good news. Someone's gonna bring you good news.
And then he woke you up. Some doctor sometime later woke you up, and what did he say to you?
And just the same way, I tell you, it was just, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was kind of like still in the dream. I fell asleep. I remember it was 9 o'clock, and I woke up, it was 11:15, because I looked at the time. The doctor comes in, wakes me up, he says, Mr. Melendez, and I woke up startled, and I look at the clock, and it's 11:15, and he says, I have good news for you. And right then and there, I looked at him, it was shock on my face, and I'm like, wow. And I knew what he was going to say. I knew he was going to tell me there's something that I have, that we're gonna, whatever.
But he had a solution.
Yeah, and I said, what is it? He goes, well, you're a great candidate for a procedure called a heart ablation. And I'm going to give you the bad news. The bad news is that, we have to do it right away. And you don't have time to think about it if you're not going to get it done. The good news is that we can take this condition of yours away. And I was screaming. I was like, what? You don't believe it. You're like an angel. I told him exactly how I felt.
I'm sure he was looking at you like you should call the orderlies and put you in the straitjacket.
Yes, and I was really excited. I said, I was told this, and I knew that I was going to be healed. And I was telling him, listen, I know I'm going to be healed.
Right.
God,
so now you did get through that surgery, and it was a partial success, and you were in recovery, and you had another patient in the room. Now tell me what happened. This other guy was in the room. You had some complications, even though it was a success. There were some complications from the ablation, but the other guy in the room, you said, was virtually on his deathbed, right? He was going downhill really quickly.
Yes. So the procedure went well for a bit. the ablation.
Yeah,
and,
right.
and that was a miracle in itself because God revealed himself to me. There was a procedure done. The ablation was what God wanted me there for. So I was thankful to God for that. I was like, wow, I never got the defibrillator, and that was great.
Right, yeah, you don't want
So, but 2 weeks after I was discharged, I started to experience the palpitations again.
Right.
Slowly but surely they progressed. 3 months down the line, they were worse.
Right.
So now I'm struggling with Jesus on my own and sharing with some religious relatives. I wasn't happy. I had a struggle with God. I was like, God, what's going on here, you know?
Right.
So, you know, you said you would heal me. I was healed for a bit, but now I got these palpitations worse. And I brought it to him again under prayer, and I felt in my heart to go back. So I called my cardiologist. He says, yes, we can do the procedure again. It's going to be more
okay.
intense.
So you were back in the hospital, right? And I want to get to the experience you had with the other patient, because that's what's really on your heart to share. And so this other guy sees the miracle that you had, where you had the success of God healing you through the doctors, and he's in really bad shape, and he asks you what's going on, and you got the ability the opportunity to share with him Jesus, right? And he accepted the Lord right there in the hospital with you. And now the day he's looking for a heart transplant, right? And you told me he dug in his heels and he said, I don't want you to give me a temporary fix, doctors. I want a new heart. They were offering him a machine that would monitor him. Now, the day you were leaving, you were being discharged. You had fully recovered now, you're being discharged. And he turns to you and says, hey, Melendez, aren't you going to pray with me?
Yes.
And you prayed with him, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly what happened. I went back 3 months later. I got the procedure done again. And now I'm healed. And I was there for 2 months. So I'm sharing with this fella that came into my room a month before I was
But Ray, you prayed with him, right?
Yes,
you were
I
leaving and you prayed with
Yep.
him, and you prayed. You said, you explained to him, look, I'm not the healer, right? You said God is the healer.
So I was leaving. I was going home, and I said bye to him, and he says, Melendez, are you going to pray over me? Because he had experienced Jesus. Now here's a guy that was next to me, and was dying. He was urinating blood. He was dying, and he was on a list. He was number 35 for a heart transplant.
Ray. I think it's important for you to tell us what happened to him.
So what happened was, right before right before I left, I prayed over him and I said, listen, I'm not a healer.
I understand, but tell me what happened to him. We really got to get this in.
Well, I got home, he got a new heart.
He got a new heart. He was number 35 on the list.
35 on the list.
And they told him that same day, right?
Yeah, and they told him that same day. The night before, they said he couldn't qualify for heart surgery.
But that same day.
That same day that I prayed over him, by the time I got home.
And now today he's well, right? He's buff. He's back doing what he used to do.
I prayed over him. He got his new heart. He's strong again. He's alive. He serves
Praise
Jesus.
God. Ray, I hate to interrupt you, but we're running out of time, and as usual, it always seems to be it goes like so quickly. But I thank you very much for coming, sharing your heart and your testimony.
You're welcome.
Welcome again to the show. As we conclude, I just ask you to consider that Jesus is here for you to give you new hope.
And I can't ever